There is a sense you use every single day that you were never taught how to understand. You were taught how to see. You were taught to listen. But nobody ever sat you down and explained what happens inside your body the moment skin meets skin. And yet this sense, the sense of touch, might be quietly shaping your mood, your stress levels, your immune system, and even how long you live. Why does a single hand on your shoulder calm a racing heart faster than words ever could? Why do some people crave touch so intensely while others flinch away from it? And why does modern life, for all its comfort, leave so many of us starving for something as simple as contact? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will never think about a handshake, a hug, or even a blanket the same way again. Let's start with something most people get completely backwards. Touch is not one sense. It is a network of senses layered on top of each other, running through your skin like wiring through the walls of a house. Your skin is the largest organ you have, and it is not just a covering. It is a sensing organ, packed with millions of receptors that detect pressure, vibration, temperature, and even the difference between a light breeze and a firm grip. Some of these receptors respond in a fraction of a second. Others take longer, building a slower, richer signal that travels up through your spinal cord and into your brain. This is why a quick tap on the arm feels sharp and immediate, while a slow, sustained touch feels like it spreads warmth through your whole body. Your nervous system is not just recording contact. It is interpreting meaning from it in real time without you ever consciously deciding to feel that way. Here is where it gets strange. In the early 2000s, scientists identified a special class of nerve fibers in human skin called C-tactile afferents. Unlike the fast-signaling nerves that tell your brain exactly where you were touched and how hard, these fibers respond best to slow, gentle stroking at roughly the speed of a caress, somewhere around 1 to 10 centimeters per second. Too fast and the fibers barely respond. Too slow, and the same thing happens. There is a very specific rhythm that lights them up the most, and that rhythm happens to match almost exactly the way a parent naturally strokes an infant's skin, or the way one person instinctively comforts another during a hug. In other words, your body may be biologically tuned to a very particular type of touch, one built less for information and more for emotion. This matters because these particular nerve fibers do not primarily report to the part of your brain that maps physical sensation. They report heavily to a region tied to emotional and social processing. So when someone touches you gently and slowly, your brain is not just registering pressure. It is registering safety, connection, and closeness, almost like touch has its own emotional frequency, separate from its physical one. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If your body is wired to crave this specific kind of contact, what happens to people who rarely get it? To understand that, we have to go back to one of the more sobering chapters in developmental science. In the mid-20th century, researchers began noticing something disturbing in infants raised in institutional settings with minimal physical contact. Despite receiving adequate food and shelter, many of these infants showed slower physical growth, weaker immune responses, and delayed emotional development compared to infants who were regularly held, touched, and comforted. It became clear that nutrition alone does not build a healthy nervous system. Physical contact appeared to be doing something food and medicine could not replicate. Later studies on animals reinforced this pattern, showing that touch deprivation early in life could alter stress hormone regulation for the long term. The conclusion researchers converged on was striking. Touch is not a luxury added on top of basic survival needs. For a developing nervous system, it functions almost like a nutrient of its own. Now here is the part most people never connect to their adult lives. That same nervous system does not stop needing this input once childhood ends. It simply gets quieter about it. As adults, we tend to describe our need for touch in emotional language, saying things like, "I just needed a hug," or "that conversation felt cold," without realizing there may be a measurable physiological process underneath those words. When researchers study adults who receive regular affectionate touch from a partner, friend, or family member, they often find lower baseline levels of cortisol, the hormone most associated with the body's stress response. They also tend to find associations with lower blood pressure, and in some studies, more stable heart rate patterns during stressful tasks. None of this means touch is a cure for stress. It means the body appears to use touch as one of many signals that tells the nervous system, right now you are safe. This is where oxytocin enters the picture, a hormone that gets thrown around constantly online, often with more confidence than the science actually supports. Oxytocin is released during touch, particularly warm, affectionate contact like hugging or hand-holding, and it plays a role in bonding, trust, and the dampening of stress responses. But oxytocin is not a simple happiness switch. Its effects depend heavily on context, on who is touching you, on your relationship to them, and even on your own past experiences with closeness. This is part of why the exact same act, a hand on the shoulder, can feel deeply comforting from one person and deeply uncomfortable from another. Your brain is not just processing the physical sensation. It is cross-referencing that sensation against memory, trust, and social context, all within milliseconds. Which brings us to a phenomenon quietly affecting a huge portion of the population, one that researchers have started calling touch deprivation, or sometimes skin hunger. This describes the psychological and physiological state that can emerge when someone goes an extended period with little to no meaningful physical contact. It is not officially classified as a medical disorder, but the pattern shows up consistently enough in surveys and psychological research to be taken seriously. People experiencing prolonged touch deprivation often report increased feelings of loneliness, heightened stress reactivity, and in some cases, a kind of low-grade anxiety they cannot quite explain. This is not simply about wanting romantic or sexual contact. Some of the strongest associations show up around platonic touch, like hugging friends, resting a hand on a family member's arm, or the simple physical presence of another person nearby. Modern life has quietly created ideal conditions for this to spread. Remote work has reduced daily incidental contact with coworkers. Cities have grown larger while personal networks have grown thinner. Screens have become the primary interface for communication, and a text message, no matter how warm the words are, cannot replicate what a hand on your back does to your nervous system. Even something as small as living alone for extended periods has been associated in research with lower rates of casual physical contact, and by extension, some of the stress buffering effects that contact seems to provide. None of this is meant to sound alarming. It is meant to explain a feeling many people already have but rarely put into words, the sense that something about modern connection feels thinner than it used to. There is also a piece of this that ties directly into your immune system, and it is one of the more surprising threads in this entire story. Chronic stress, left unmanaged, is associated with elevated inflammation markers and altered immune function over time. Since touch appears to help regulate the body's stress response in the short term, some researchers have proposed that consistent, low-level physical affection, hugging a partner, receiving a comforting touch from a friend, may contribute in a small but real way to how efficiently the body handles daily stress. This is not a claim that touch prevents illness. It is a more modest and more honest idea that the body's stress response system and its immune response system are deeply intertwined, and touch appears to be one of several everyday inputs that influences both. Now let's talk about something almost nobody discusses when it comes to touch, and that is how wildly different our sensitivity to it actually is from person to person. Not everyone experiences touch the same way, and this is not simply a matter of personal preference. Differences in nerve density across the skin, prior experiences, cultural upbringing, and even certain neurological and sensory conditions can shape how touch feels on a fundamental level. Some individuals process touch input more intensely than others, sometimes experiencing textures, pressure, or unexpected contact as overwhelming rather than comforting. This is part of why blanket advice like just hug it out or physical touch fixes everything falls apart in the real world. The nervous system is not one size fits all, and respecting that difference is just as important as understanding the science behind why touch matters in the first place. This is also where consent and comfort become inseparable from the biology itself. Touch that is wanted and touch that is unwanted are not processed the same way by the brain, even if the physical action looks identical from the outside. Context changes everything. The same gentle touch that calms one nervous system into a state of safety can trigger a stress response in another if trust is not present. This is not a minor detail tacked onto the science. It may be one of the central reasons touch has such a powerful effect on humans in the first place. Our nervous system did not evolve simply to detect contact. It evolved to detect safe contact within relationships, within social bonds, within a framework of trust built over time. Which leads to a question worth sitting with for a moment. If touch is this foundational to human physiology and emotional regulation, why do so many of us treat it as an afterthought? Why do we schedule workouts, plan meals, track sleep, and optimize almost every visible part of our health, while leaving something this fundamental completely unexamined? Part of the answer may be that touch is invisible in a way other health habits are not. You cannot see a hug show up on a fitness tracker. You cannot graph the effect of resting your hand on a loved one's shoulder during a hard conversation. Because it resists measurement in daily life, it quietly slips out of the category of things we consciously maintain, even though the underlying biology suggests it deserves a place there. There is also a quieter, more personal layer to all of this, one that has less to do with hormones and more to do with meaning. Touch often functions as a kind of non-verbal language, capable of communicating things words struggle to express. A hand on the back during grief. An arm around the shoulder during celebration. The simple, wordless comfort of someone sitting close beside you during a difficult moment. These moments carry emotional weight not because of what is said, but because of what is felt, literally and figuratively at the same time. In many ways, touch may be one of the oldest forms of communication we have, older than language itself, rooted in the earliest survival instincts of caregiving and connection between a parent and an infant. This raises a practical, grounded question that has nothing to do with grand gestures or dramatic lifestyle overhauls. If touch plays this kind of quiet, foundational role in nervous system regulation and emotional well-being, what does a healthy relationship with touch actually look like day to day? For some people, it might mean noticing how often they hug the people they love, and whether that frequency has quietly dropped over the years without them realizing it. For others, it might mean recognizing that a lack of physical affection in their life is contributing to a low hum of stress they have been attributing to something else entirely: work, finances, or general burnout. And for some, especially those who find touch overwhelming or uncomfortable, it might mean understanding that their nervous system simply processes contact differently, and that difference is not a flaw to fix, but a variation to respect and communicate clearly to the people around them. It is worth being honest about the limits of this science as well. Touch is not a treatment. It is not a substitute for medical care, therapy, or addressing the root causes of chronic stress, anxiety, or illness. Researchers studying this field are careful, and rightly so, not to overstate what a hug or a handhold can accomplish. What the research does support is more modest and, in some ways, more interesting. It suggests that touch is one thread among many in the fabric of human health, sitting alongside sleep, nutrition, movement, and social connection, quietly influencing how our stress systems behave, how safe we feel in our bodies, and how connected we feel to the people around us. It is not the whole picture, but it may be a more important piece of that picture than most of us have ever stopped to consider. Think about the last time you were touched in a way that genuinely calmed you down. Maybe it was a hand on your shoulder from someone you trusted during a hard week. Maybe it was a long hug at an airport, the kind that lasts just a few seconds longer than expected. In that moment, without you noticing, your nervous system was running a quiet, complex process, reading pressure, rhythm, and context, and deciding, based on all of it, whether you were safe. That, not a small thing. That is one of the oldest systems in the human body, quietly doing its job, the same way it has for every human before you, and every human after. So the next time someone reaches out to comfort you, or you reach out to comfort someone else, it might be worth pausing for just a second to notice what is actually happening underneath the surface. Not just a gesture. Not just a social nicety. A conversation between nervous systems, older than words, still running quietly beneath everything we call human connection. And maybe the real question is not whether touch matters. The science already suggests it does. The real question is how much of it you have been quietly going without, and what might change if you let a little more of it back in.